So judgment has been reserved by the Constitutional Court this week over whether South Africans forfeit their citizenship if they acquire a second nationality. Now, the long-running legal battle is being led by DA abroad, but let's get a perspective now from Home Affairs Portfolio Committee member Adrian Roos, who is also with the Democratic Alliance. Adrian, a good evening to you. Thank you so much for joining us. Maybe a good place to start the discussion is perhaps the perspective on the Democratic Alliance. The matter, of course, is sitting in the Court at the moment with judgment reserved, but why it was important for the Democratic Alliance to lead the cause of challenging the South African Citizenship Act?
Yeah, thanks, Naledi, and greetings to your viewers. I think the key thing, and you know, the Democratic Alliance receives a number of inquiries every day from residents around South Africa, from residents around the world that are facing challenges with the government and trying to access their basic human rights. And this was one of the major issues that came up through DA abroad, where South Africans were saying they had lost their citizenship without their knowledge. And this was through the simple act of obtaining the citizenship of another country without informing the Minister of Home Affairs. And the challenge really is that, you know, South Africa allows dual citizenship. So the question was really, should you allow a government minister unfettered discretion to determine whether you should keep your South African citizenship or not? And the Democratic Alliance says no. I mean, we should be proud to be South Africans. And even the Constitution says that you cannot be deprived of your citizenship. And that is why this was an essential case to fight.
Yeah, but so you talk about the power of the minister, and that's important because I want to look at the act in and of itself. And my understanding, and you can help me here, is that what the Citizenship Act 88 of 95 essentially does is that it says that South Africans automatically forfeit their citizenship if they acquire a second nationality while not being a minor, except in cases of marriage, unless they proactively apply for a retention of citizenship document from the Minister of Home Affairs. So talk to me about where, so in the Act particularly, what the Democratic Alliance takes issue with.
Yeah, so look, this provision actually comes from Apartheid era law and was the Bantu Homelands Citizenship Act of 1970. And the idea of this was really to, you know, many Black South Africans were forced to leave the country, flee the country during apartheid. And this was a tool of the government to strip these persons of their citizenship. And it absolutely does not belong in a post-apartheid legal system at all.
Yeah.
I mean, the sole purpose of this was to look at Black South Africans that had gone overseas and have an excuse for the minister to be able to strip them of their citizenship. And really, when you look at law as well, it needs to serve a legitimate government purpose, to have just administrative law. And if you look at our current situation, you have to ask yourself, the government says that it allows dual citizenship. So what is the just administrative purpose of putting it in the minister's hand to determine whether that person should keep their citizenship or not?
Yeah. What do you say to the...
And, you know, the DA is absolutely against this apartheid law, and these laws should be scrapped without question.
Well, you say it originates from it, but at the moment it's the Act of 1995. But Adrian, what do you say to the argument that it is, you know, almost not patriotic to want a second citizenship, that if you are a South African, you should be patriotic of that and committed to the country, for instance, and not looked for an opt-out for citizenship? What do you say to that argument?
Look, I think you just have to look at what I was just saying. I mean, you could argue the same during apartheid. Why didn't everybody stay in the country? And we cannot treat everybody the same. We cannot treat people as a group of persons that have the same.
Yeah, but we're not. Yeah, so I'm talking about. I'm asking you to look at the context with which we're dealing with now, because I don't want us to go into where we were over 30 years ago, because certainly, you know, pre-1994, people were outside of the country because they were exiled or they were fighting for the struggle. So that's a different context. In the context of a democratic South Africa, why do we need South Africans to have to hang on to their citizenship when they also want the option to opt out of the country?
Look, the unfortunate thing is in the last 30 years, the government has not created enough jobs in this country. And it's the number one mission and purpose of the DA in the government of national unity to build the economy and create jobs. And unfortunately, the government has not done that in the last 30 years. And you have to ask yourself the question, should you be stripped of your citizenship because you want to provide for your family, because you are forced to go overseas and look for a job to provide your family? You need to ask yourself that question as well. So persons don't always leave the country because they want to, because they don't like South Africa. That is extremely rarely the fact. The fact of the matter is that many people are forced to go overseas because they cannot find opportunities here in South Africa. And that doesn't mean that they should be stripped of their citizenship.
Okay. Talk to me about you obviously want this matter to be wrapped up quickly in the Constitutional Court, the importance of urgency for you.
Look, I think, and, I don't want to harp on the apartheid thing, but I've spoken to a number of persons. And it's a deeply personal thing. I don't know if we as South Africans really always have that sense of national pride. It seems to be when the Springboks play, then everybody has that sense of national pride. But imagine how you would feel if somebody had to turn around to you and say that today you are no longer a South African citizen and you didn't intend to lose your citizenship. You didn't mean it at all. So for those persons that have been stripped of their citizenship, this is extremely personal. The right to citizenship in the Constitution, if you look at the interim Constitution, it said that nobody can be deprived of their citizenship without a justification. But that was changed in the Constitution. That without justification was removed. And it was say you should not be deprived of your citizenship. And people are extremely proud to be South Africans. And, families are split. Persons are no longer able to pass their citizenship onto their children. And all that they intended to do was provide for their families. And many intend to come back. And we need persons to come back to South Africa and contribute to the rebuilding of South Africa. And many want to do that. And because of this archaic legislation, they're unable to do that. And so it is urgent and important for the DA to, again, grow the economy and create jobs and let South Africans that want to contribute come back and do so.
Okay, so the leader of the DA abroad, Stevens, raised an interesting point, and I just want to get, the definition of, what it is exactly that DA abroad really wants to see here. He's quoted as saying, once the Constitutional Court concludes this process, we can establish the mechanism for restitution. Explain the restitution part of that statement for us.
Yeah, look, so the reality here is that, unfortunately, in our previous dispensation, there was a large degree of incompetence. And this, I put a parliamentary question a few months back to say how many South Africans have lost their citizenship. And the Department of Home Affairs under Dr. Adrian Roos couldn't tell me. They actually couldn't say how many had lost their citizenship. So people were literally coming into the country and finding this out on an ad hoc basis. And so we're going to need a very nuanced approach because some persons, they want their citizenship back. There will need to be a mechanism where they can apply. The judgment of the Supreme Court says that you will automatically receive your citizenship back. But some persons did indeed intend to leave the country and renounce their South African citizenship. And so there will also need to be a mechanism for those persons to say, we don't want our citizenship back. So it's certainly not an easy matter. I think for Dr. Leon Schreiber, there's many wicked challenges in the Department of Home Affairs, such as this. But certainly he is aware of the challenge, and the DA abroad have looked at the best practices around the world. And part of this is really to give persons an opportunity to say, I want to claim my citizenship back. And for those that do not want it, to do the same.
Yeah. And you may have touched on this a little bit, Adrian, but I just want to perhaps get more detail from you. How this matter is being discussed in the Home Affairs Portfolio Committee, anything that stands out in those discussions and deliberations?
Yeah, so we certainly raised it. Unfortunately, because of the way that government works, you cannot, the department is not able to act on a judgment until it is made. And so the Supreme Court of Appeal has ruled that this is indeed unconstitutional and irrational. And now the Constitutional Court needs to ratify that. So the Department of Home Affairs does need to wait for that. But Dr. Leon Schreiber on Tuesday's portfolio meeting did again, he did express that he is aware of this judgment and that they have looked into the methods already, but they're unable to make any pronouncements, etc., until the Constitutional Court actually makes the final ruling that this provision is unconstitutional and that the department needs to go ahead. So they are certainly aware and ready.
All right, and I imagine that we wait then for the Concord. We do appreciate your time this evening. Thank you so much for speaking to us. Home Affairs Portfolio Committee member Adrian Roos speaking to us here on News at Prime.